You talked about the paleo zone diet being sort of the optimal version of the zone, and
And all 6 people in the world who can follow it would agree with that.
all right. So you explain it as key points: 2 pounds of vegetables per day, and also I guess 6 or 7 grams of omega-3 fatty acids. That's what I guess scientists think now.
Our best
Paleo
estimate,
man.
yes.
Yeah, right. But you've based your recommendation for the ideal AA-EPA ratio on the Japanese population, and they only consume 2.5 grams of omega-3 per day, and also, I mean, arguably have a higher glycemic load diet with noodles and rice occasionally. I mean, lots of fruits and vegetables still, but higher glycemic load than Paleo man. So I'm wondering if the Paleo diet is not actually optimal, because it seems, just looking at the diet, that Paleolithic man would have had a dangerously low arachidonic acid to EPA ratio, and would have had decreased immune function or increased bleeding, any of those other problems that come with a low ratio. So I was wondering if you could just explain that maybe.
Well, in the Japanese population, you can now do some sub-selection. There's a part of Japan that's not part of mainland Japan. It's called Okinawa. And Okinawans really have a completely different diet than the Japanese diet. One, they eat virtually no rice. It's very hard to grow rice on a volcanic island. Two, they eat a lot more fish. Their levels of intake of fish and omega-3 fatty acids is nearly double that of the Japanese. They eat about 2 kilograms, or about a kilogram or 2 pounds of vegetables per day. They are dramatically healthier than the Japanese population, both in total lifespan and basically health span in terms of their disability index. So if there is a population that is as close to those Paleolithic recommendations, and they also eat more pork, far more pork than the Japanese do, it will be basically the Okinawan population. And when you study the older Okinawans, they're remarkably healthy, remarkably spry, and they have legitimate birth records to support their longevity. But now in Japan today, the one area that the fastest growing levels of obesity is Okinawa. Why? The biggest Air Force base in Japan is in Okinawa. And of the fast food restaurants which are sprouted around there, say, it's a lot more fun eating a McDonald's hamburger than making 2 pounds of vegetables. And so what you're seeing now is maybe just the Okinawans are genetically different. But within one generation, the old ways have shifted completely. And now you're basically seeing a rapid rise of obesity in that population, a rapid rise in diabetes. In Japan, when we look at the ratio of arachidonic acid to EPA, in older elderly Japanese, it's about 1.5. When we look at younger Japanese, it's about 8. Why? They say, we don't like the old ways. It's not just eating fish, they eat a lot of sea vegetables, things like sea slugs. Not very appetizing. Lots of seaweed. So the old ways are changing. And the old ways are basically, and what you're seeing now is a rapid rise of so-called Western diseases in Japan with that rise of inflammation. Obviously, I can't go back in time. I don't have the time machine that allows me to take blood samples 10,000 years ago. But with that amount of, remember, the Neopaleolithic man, one of their primary sources of protein was meat. When you eat meat muscle, it's rich in arachidonic acid. So they'd have to have that levels of EPA coming in. And remember, if they had a poor immune system, you wouldn't be here today. They would have been dead, couldn't pass their genes along. So again, what we do, we try to learn from the past. We don't live in the past. You learn from the past. And then apply what those lessons from the past to the present. So we can take the best of what we know and try to put together what would be an appropriate dietary program that's in maximum harmony with our genes. And don't do it unconsciously. Say, I will only eat things I can spear with a fork or a knife. It's not saying, that's a good starting point. But saying, okay, what can we learn from a knowledge of our best estimates of 10,000 years ago? What can we learn from the old Okinawans before they all die? And how can we apply that knowledge to the foods we eat today? It doesn't say you have to eat only Paleolithic ingredients. Saying, no, you can use that. Can you put together modern foods, maybe highly technological foods like in molecular baking, that can reproduce the same responses that we now know that were an integral part of our survival as a species up to this point in time. So that's the benefits of basically, yes, everything is an estimate, everything is really a guess, but a guess that you can basically now do scientific experiments. In the very few, and there are few, I mean there's two, that have been published, yes, if you follow a diet that's richer in Paleolithic ingredients, all things being considered, you'll have more satiation, better effects on blood sugar and blood lipids. And a Paleolithic diet turns out to be, our best estimates now, 40% carbohydrates, 30% protein, 30% fat.